Before I hand it over to Jody, I'll ask the PlantPure community staff to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Ellis Stevens and I'm the Pod Support Programs Manager at PlantPure Communities, and I'm joining from Boston, Massachusetts.
Hi everyone, I'm Caroline Dyer. I'm the Vice President of PlantPure Communities and I'm joining from Durham, North Carolina.
Hey everyone, I'm Josh Wayne and I'm a Regional Manager joining in from Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay, and now we're going to shift into Jody's introduction.
Okay, I figured out how to unmute, so here I am. Hi everyone, I'm Jody Cass. I'm the Executive Director of PlantPure Communities, and I am coming to you from New York. So welcome everybody. We're so happy to have you here. We do have a mixed audience today, and I just want to explain what's happening here at PlantPure Communities and why we're having this event. It's all started with a incredible, important commentary by Dr. T. Colin Campbell about the link between nutrition and the COVID-19 coronavirus. He had issued that. We posted it on our website earlier this month. And what it does is it explains how folks can really take steps to protect themselves against the worst effects of the virus. It's very, very compelling. If you haven't read it yet, I encourage everybody to read it. We'll be posting a link to that article in the chat, so make sure you do take a look at it. But it'll make you feel better to know that there are things you can do to help yourself. What PlantPure Communities decided to do was to create a global jumpstart, so to help people really take steps towards protecting themselves by improving the quality of their diet and making themselves healthier. And on the 19th of this month, we actually kicked off a global jumpstart, and so we are now in day 5 of that global jumpstart. And this session that we're holding this afternoon is actually part of that. The registration for that Jumpstart is closed right now, but we recently decided we're going to do another one. It's going to be a little bit different, but it'll build on a lot of the things that we learned in this first one. And that one kicks off on May 10th, and registration's open. We actually haven't formally announced that one yet, but we have several hundred people already signed up, so we definitely welcome you to sign up for that one as well. If you are signed up for this one, you're more than welcome to sign up for the next one too. We do have about 6,000 people on the current, participating in the current Jumpstart, and from about 81 countries, which is pretty exciting. Part of being in this Jumpstart, everybody who signs up gets an email every morning or every afternoon with a lot of really great information, telling them what to do, some videos, some material to read. And we also have occasionally some exciting promotions or specials to offer you. This morning we included some information about the PlantPure Kitchen live show. There's actually a special going on right now, 30 days free, if anyone's interested in it. If you have any questions about that, you should also add them into the chat today, and we can see if we can get those questions answered. It does expire on May 24th. And so with that, I'm just so excited for this session. I know I have so much to learn. Every time I hear Kim Campbell or watch Kim Campbell, I learn so much, even though I've been at this on my own journey for about 6 years. But so take it away, Kim. We're ready for you.
Thank you, Jody. I'm still learning. There's so much to learn in this plant-based world. I thought I would just share a little bit about how I got into this business of food and all things culinary. It was something that I was really interested in as a kid, and I went into dietetics in college and ended up full circle in the classroom teaching, and 3 kids at home. So I continued my career in teaching, and Nelson about 10 years ago wanted to do these jump starts. So he hired a very young chef. She was great. She knew everything about culinary, but she had only been plant-based for a short amount of time. So we started working together and talking about all things food, and I ended up helping out with the jump starts, which was really exciting because is you watch people make this transition and get healthy. It's so rewarding. It's fun. And the food part of it was, I was just so passionate about it that I quit my job in the classroom. So Nelson, he came to the rescue because I was about it up to here with my patients in the classroom. So I retired from teaching essentially and got involved at PlantPure, and then we did more and more Jumpstarts, hundreds of people going through these Jumpstarts. I wanted to be a resource for people, helping them see how easy this could be. So I wrote a cookbook. When Nelson was working on the film and going back and forth to Kentucky, because most of you have seen the film at this point, I was home typing on my computer frantically trying to get a lot of our Jumpstart recipes in a cookbook. And so that's how PlantPure Nation was born, PlantPure Nation Cookbook. I wrote 2 cookbooks. I got really excited about that. I had more things to share, so I wrote my second book called PlantPure Kitchen. I love my job. I love cooking and I love people and education. So I really feel blessed to be where I'm at. And I just, like Jody said, she's still learning. I'm still learning, and I love learning from other people. So today I want to go through a lot of the things that you've seen in the seminar. You saw, we talked about cleaning out your pantry, and we talked about how to cook without oil, appliances, and how to keep this inexpensive, because being plant-based is not expensive. It's just to me, it's a very economical way to eat if you do it correctly. So I thought we would kind of cover some of those topics today. So we'll go from there.
Yes, great, Kim. Thank you. To kick us off, can you tell us about the high points of cleaning out the pantry? What should people be aware of when reading a label? So what stays and what goes?
Yeah, I think I've been into a couple of clients' homes where we've actually had to clean out their pantry. And so you really, it's a good time to clean and get everything out of there and really look at things. And so while you're cleaning, you have to look at labels and deciding that you're going to give up the cake mixes and the muffin mixes, the frosting, the Jif peanut butter, which is horrible for you because there's a lot of added oils in it, your sugary cereals, and then decide by going into the ingredients and really look and see what's in those products, because you might be really surprised. Something that you thought was fairly healthy, like a vegetable soup in a jar or in a can, and then you look at the can and you realize that it has a lot of oil in it. So, just take a box, put it all in the box and get rid of it, because out of sight, out of mind. And then in the fun part, same thing with your refrigerator and your freezer, but the fun part is stocking up. And so that's where, getting people to invest in things like beans and whole grains, nuts and nut butters. There's lots of choices there, more than there was, 25 years ago. Coconut milks and all of your condiments, your soy sauces, miso paste, vinegars, and that was in the seminar. But really keeping it whole food, plant-based as much as possible. But it's hard to get rid of some of those tried and true, lemon poppy seed muffins boxes and the cereal, especially if you have a lot of other people in your house that don't necessarily want to go down this path. So maybe you have to sort.
Great. I was going to ask you next, what would you recommend to restock the pantry with, and what basic food items do you always have on hand, like spices, whole grains, legumes? So if there's any others.
So I sort of went through my own pantry this morning just to kind of refresh my mind. What is in my pantry? The first thing that I think is the most important thing are your obviously your produce. Your refrigerator is going to be full of produce, but beans, having a lot of beans, and you have to decide whether you want to buy them dried or whether you want to buy them in the can. I do it both ways. If you have both and you're in a hurry and you don't have black beans that are already cooked up, you can pull them out of a can. Just remember that a lot of the canned beans have a lot of salt in them, so you need to rinse them really well. Whole grains, there are a multitude of whole grains to choose from. I actually pulled my drawer to see what I had in there, and it's pretty basic. We tend to keep 2 or 3 different kinds of rices. We have oats and we have quinoa, and I had some barley in there, and that was pretty much all I had. I think if you put too much in there and you're experimenting with too many things, a lot of times you're not using the wheat berries or, the oat groats, things like that. So start out small and just kind of build up to it. You'll find what you love. And I know for Nelson and I, it's quinoa and rice. That's a pretty common one. I had whole grain pastas and noodles. We tend to eat the same type of whole grain pasta, which is brown rice pasta, but you have to find the one that you like. And then your herbs and spices, and that can be a big investment. I know when my kids went off to college, they didn't have any spices, and a jar of spice can range anywhere from $2 to $8, depending on the spice. So, find those 10 that you really like and that you use a lot. Get some spice blends, but invest in your spices. Nut butters, I tend to have, and I looked in my pantry, I had 2 nut butters. I had peanut butter and I had almond butter, and that was it. But if you're allergic, there's sunflower butter, there's different ones out there. And I use those for oil replacers because I'll talk about that in a minute. And all your condiments, I have soy sauce or tamari sauce, whichever you prefer, or you could do liquid amino brags. Miso paste, I love a miso paste. Plenty of tomatoes, a variety of vinegars to choose from, mustards, barbecue sauces, Worcestershire sauce, liquid smoke, ginger paste, curry paste. What I recommend is you don't have to run out and get it all at once. It can be really expensive, but as you're making recipes from my cookbook or other vegan cookbooks, you'll start to build up. So kind of do it slowly, and that's what our kids did when they moved away from home. Having some tofu and tempeh on hand, because many of the ingredients in almost every vegan cookbook has tofu and tempeh. And then we have dried fruit. We have raisins and apricots and things like that we can have on our cereal in the morning, or I use it if I'm making a muffin or something like that. But again, don't run out and think you've got to replace everything right away. You've got to go through the pantry list and purchase all of it because it could get pretty expensive. So baby steps.
Thank you, Kim. We've also had a lot of questions about cooking techniques. So steaming, blanching, dicing. Can you break it down and make it simple?
Right. I'm going to stick with cooking without oil because I have some tips. The first thing is everybody thinks you can't cook without oil. You can't saute vegetables without oil. And you can if you have a really good pan. And I'll get to that in a minute. But if you have a really good fry pan and you have water, or you can use vegetable broth, or you can use a wine if you're making a marinara sauce, and you just saute your onions and your peppers and a little bit of that. You don't need to use heavy oils. That's the thing I would get rid of in the pantry, just completely get rid of the oils. Maybe you keep a spray oil if you're using waffle iron, for example, and it's sticking, something like that for mechanical purposes. So really learning how to saute with using vegetable broths and water. I usually use water. I keep it really simple. And then roasting vegetables. We use parchment paper. I have a silicone mat. Nelson's really good at this. He'll cut up whatever veggies we have and he'll shake and bake it, or put it in a Tupperware container and shake it, put his favorite spices in it, and then we just dump them all on the parchment paper and bake them in the oven at around 375, and they come out beautiful. I bake squashes, I bake mushrooms, all sorts of things. But make sure you stick with a parchment paper or a silicone pad because nothing sticks to it. And then a lot of people really like that fried texture you get when you deep fry things. So the solution to that is to maybe bread things. So you can dip let's say it's an eggplant. You can dip it in flour, milk, and some breadcrumbs, and then put it on a parchment paper and bake it in the oven, and it comes out really crispy. All your vegetables will come out crispy. And if you have an air fryer, which I have, you can put those in the air fryer and you come up with something that tastes pretty darn close to a fried eggplant. When you're baking, you can substitute oils with things like fruit purees, it's a tongue twister, avocados. I use tofu, I use nut butters, and I love to use sweet potatoes as a substitute, a mashed sweet potato. And then for sauces and dressings, if you were using some of the recipes that they gave you in the Global Jumpstart, you can see that we use things like cashews, maybe a little bit of cashews, maybe a little bit of tofu, not xanthan gum. We used chia seeds to make it a little bit thick. So there are a lot of strategies for getting rid of oil. And once you get rid of the oil, you will never go back. Yeah.
Thank you, Kim. So our next question here has to do with various cooking techniques. For some people who may not be familiar with terms such as steaming, blanching, or dicing, can you explain those in very simple terms for us?
Well, a dice is just really the size that you want things cut in. So you have a small dice, a medium dice, a large dice, julienne. Those are just really your sizes. But again, the steaming and sautéing are just different ways you can prepare the vegetables. So I have a steamer basket, which fits right down in a pan, and you can put your vegetables in and steam them nicely. I don't use a steamer a whole lot. I tend to sauté. But as far as, the dicing and the different vegetable cuts, most of what I do is medium dice or small dice. And I like to cut, but I also have some utensils that really help with that too.
All right, thank you, Kim. And so our next question here is about kitchen appliances. Do you have a few favorite kitchen appliances that you think are important in order to be successful in this type of diet? Are there certain gadgets that you have on hand?
I think your kitchen is like, it's your workroom, right? The more things you have in your kitchen, the more successful you're going to be. But I don't think you need to run out and get all of the most expensive products. The first thing I would suggest is having really good pans. Invest in good pans because it'll make life so much easier. Stainless steel pans are great, and that's what I had. I have an induction stove, so I have to be careful what kind of pans I can use on my stove. I love cast iron cookware with an enamel finish. I have La Creuset. It's a big investment. You can also get those types of pans through a company called Lodge, Lodge, and it's a lot cheaper than La Creuset. They're heavy pans, so they just sit on my stove all the time. You can also get all-clad, hard, anodized nonstick cookware. They're a little bit cheaper, but really invest in a nice set of pans, and then get yourself some really good knives. Learn how to sharpen your knives, or take them someplace. I take mine to a place right here in town, and they sharpen my knives. So as far as appliances, I think that the nicest appliance that I use all the time more than any other appliance would be my food processor. And then I use a blender. I have two blenders. I have a NutriBullet, which is a 900 watt. I have a Vitamix. A lot of people don't want to invest in a Vitamix right away because they're pretty expensive, but you can go to Costco and get them for about $300. Start out with a NutriBullet. If you're using it a lot and you really have success with it, then you can graduate to a Vitamix, or you can get a refurbished Vitamix. They have a lot of those on hand too. I like the bullet because it's small, and sometimes for just a dressing, I don't have to get out my great big Vitamix. An Instant Pot is really, really nice if you're cooking a lot of dry beans. It works as a crock pot, it makes yogurt, it sautés things, it's great for traveling. So you get a big bang for your buck with an Instant Pot. And then for those of you who don't like to cut and chop, get yourself some choppers. I have a Vidalia Chop Wizard, but there's a lot of choppers on the market today. Lots of measuring spoons. I have tons of mason jars. They're great for, you can freeze things in them. I store dressings and sauces. I don't batch cook, but I make things ahead a lot. And then you can go another level. There's Nano machines, and there's air fryers and air poppers and French fry slicers. You don't have to have all of those, but I would recommend the pans, the food processor, the knives, and then I think my favorite appliance would be probably the Instant Pot. I'm an appliance junkie. Nelson will tell you that.
Thank you, Kim. So I guess related to the saving money while creating eating a plant-based diet, what do people know about shopping and different things that they can do to be cost effective?
Right. Well, you know, the first inclination when people go plant-based is that they have to go to Whole Foods. And although I love Whole Foods, it could be a little expensive. And it's, to me, it's my playground. And so I always spend too much money if I'm at Wegmans or Whole Foods. So, you know, you can get a lot of really good deals right at Walmart. And they have a lot of organic foods too. Trader Joe's, if you're fortunate enough to have a Trader Joe's nearby, that's a great place to grocery shop. Shop in bulk, you know, get things, you know, your nuts and your seeds and your grains, you can get those in bulk and save money that way. Don't be afraid to use the frozen section. There's a lot of frozen vegetables that are organic. And I actually have 2 freezers. I have an extra freezer that I store a lot of extra things that Nelson and I use. And then avoid those processed vegan foods. And that's why I say Whole Foods is sort of my playground, because I go in there and I find all sorts of things I want to try and play with, but you don't really need to have all of those things. So avoid the processed cheeses and the processed yogurts. I mean, there's some that are great and you have to look at your ingredients, but there's others where there's a big, long ingredient list and most of it has a lot of oil and sugar, so I'd really avoid that. Another way you can save money is double your batches and freeze them. So if you're making chili, why not double it and then you can freeze it and stick it in your freezer. That's why we have a freezer, because we have so much extra food. It's just the 2 of us. Make a meal plan. Go to the grocery store less often. If you're creating a meal plan and you have a list, you're not going to go to the grocery store all the time. Buy foods that are in season. Consult the Dirty Dozen. If you can't afford to buy it all organic, then just buy the things. Just be careful about the Dirty Dozen and don't buy the things that are on that list, because they do a really good job of telling you what produce is laden with pesticides. If you eat potatoes, eat a lot of them because they're cheap, and so is rice. So I actually think this is a very cheap way to eat.
Excellent. And related to the Dirty Dozen, you know, that's a great place for people to go to get information that's accurate, but sometimes when you're searching the internet for things, you don't find the best information. Can you provide some tips for people on how to educate themselves about a plant-based diet?
Right. I have some websites that I really love to go to. I go around and look at recipes. That's my bad habit. I like to watch YouTube videos, but I think there are some websites. Forks Over Knives does a great job. They have a wonderful website with lots of recipe resources. The Happy Pear, they're in Ireland. They have some great recipes. They're really fun to watch. There's a woman in Australia, and I think she has a site called Cooking with Plants. I mean, I'm talking about food. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of other places if you're just looking for health information, but if you're looking for great recipes, those are some really good sites to go to. I should have made a list because there's a list a mile long, but here's the thing. If you're going to a website and they use oil, use the strategies that I just suggested and just leave the oil out, because most of the recipes out there are really, really easy to substitute. So you don't have to go to a website that doesn't use any oil. You'll learn to make that adjustment as you get better in the kitchen.
Thank you, Kim. So we had tons of questions from people about specific ingredients. And so for this next portion here, we're going to be asking you, all the questions that have been submitted via email to us about certain ingredients. So the first one is from Cheryl, and Cheryl asks, is sunflower lecithin, the sunflower lecithin ingredient that is found in almond milk, is it an oil and therefore not good to drink?
Right, it's an oil, and if you look at a lot of the plant-based milks, you have to be careful because some of them have the soy lecithin in them, which is just an oil. They also carry carrageenan, which makes them really thick. They use fillers to create that thickness. So I think if you could stick with the milks that have the lower number of ingredients, but yeah, lecithin is just nothing more than an oil. Rice milks have oil in them too, and I tend to stay away from rice milks because I just don't think there's a whole lot of nutrient value in rice milk.
Great, thank you. So our next question is from Dallas, And he asked, what do you think of soy or coconut yogurt? Are you familiar with any good brands?
I am. I'm not familiar with the coconut yogurt, but I love Kite Hill yogurt. It's expensive, and now Kite Hill carries Greek style plant-based yogurt, so you don't have to strain it. I used to take it and strain it because it was kind of soft, but you can just open it up, and it's really thick, and it's about $5 or $6 for. I think there's about 4 or 5 cups in it. It's a little expensive. It's extravagant, but there aren't a lot of ingredients in it. So I think Kite Hill is a really good brand.
Great, thank you for that recommendation. So our next question is from Bo. Is it better to substitute tofu with lentils and beans? What is the healthier option?
That's a hard question because it really depends on what you're cooking. If you're making lasagna, for example, and you want to make a ricotta cheese, I don't think you can substitute a lentil with ricotta cheese. I mean, if like today, I think I'm making a cauliflower sort of walnut taco mixture. And if you could probably use beans in that, you could probably use, or you could use tofu. I think it just really depends. If a recipe calls for baked tofu, you could bake chickpeas and put chickpeas in it. I think it just really depends on what type of texture you're after.
Thank you, Kim. So the next question, how do you feel about tofu and tempeh? Are they whole foods? And Judy would like to know how you use tempeh.
Yeah, that's a really good question too. Of the two, tofu is more processed than tempeh. The process that they go through is, they grind up the soybeans and then they cook it and then they put something in it to help it to sort of coagulate, separate, like the curds in the whey, and then they throw the watery part out and then they press the curds. So in a sense, you're deleting something out of the whole soybean. So tempeh is made with whole beans and they inoculate it with a fungus and it grows all around the beans. So you can actually see when you have a cake of tempeh, you can actually see what's growing around it. I had to learn to like tempeh and I forced myself to buy it every now and then because it's not something I use a lot and we're not used to it. I personally like tofu a little better, but I do buy tempeh. I just think you just have to adjust to it because the texture is very different.
Thank you, Kim. Next question, why are fermented products beneficial?
Fermented products are great because they have probiotics in them. So they have good bacteria in them. Yogurt is a fermented product. Kimchi is a fermented product. I make my own yogurt actually, and I put probiotics in it, which is really nice. You can do that in the Instant Pot. Miso paste is a probiotic. So when people make miso soup, it's supposed to be really good for your gut. The problem with that though is if you overcook it, you're killing those really good bacteria. So I think fermented products are great.
Great. We did have someone ask, how do you use miso paste? And if it's miso soup or?
Miso paste. There's so many different kinds. There's a chickpea paste. There's, it's made with fermented soybeans. But if you're allergic to soybeans, they have a chickpea miso paste. It's got that umami fifth flavor and it's salty. It's very salty, but it's different than just straight up salt. It just has a really nice, little bit like soy, a little bit of a fermented soy flavor, like soy sauce. I don't know, you just have to try it. But if you get a container, it lasts for a long time and you can keep it in the back of your refrigerator forever. But it's great put it in salad dressings, put it in cheese sauces, put it in stir fries. It's wonderful.
Great. And continuing on with the fermented products, Mary Jo has asked, how do you make dairy-free yogurt?
I have a video on there and I could provide that to Jody. It's just we did a Facebook Live on it once, but I have a quick sort of a top down and I'll give Jody the link and she can share it. It's super easy. I use the Instant Pot and it's very specific to a certain kind of soy milk. And then I just put probiotics in the milk and I put it in the Instant Pot and 10 hours later I have yogurt. But I think in order for you to really understand, you'd need to watch the video.
Great. We can definitely share that afterwards. And Kathy is wondering about cornmeal and whole grain corn cereals like Corn Chex. Would you
Yeah.
recommend them? Eat
I
them?
looked at that yesterday, and there's a lot of stuff in that. I think they put vitamins and they spray it, right? They spray it with stuff. I think Corn Chex is probably highly processed. I use cornmeals. I use corn flours. I think they're fine. I have masa harina. I've made my own tortillas, which are wonderful. I think the issue with corn that my father-in-law always says is you want to make sure you're using non-GMO corn flour, corn starch, because it's one of the biggest offenders of genetically modified foods.
Great, thanks, Kim. Can you touch on coconut milk? Is it healthy? Can you specifically touch on the saturated fat? And then also let us know what you do with the leftover coconut milk when you don't use everything that's in the can for a recipe.
Right. Coconut milks are the coconut milk itself is a saturated plant fat that they're actually less reactive in the body than unsaturated fats. And my father-in-law can probably really address this well. Saturated fats that are within plants are not unhealthy. I mean, you shouldn't eat lots of them, excessive amounts like avocados or nuts or seeds. You know, you have to be mindful of that. But Dr. Campbell's going to address that in his next book. So when I use coconut milk, I don't use a whole can. I might use a quarter of a cup, couple of tablespoons. And what I do, because, you know, what are you going to do with that extra can? You've got all this coconut milk, and you don't need to use the whole can because it has a lot of flavor in it. You only need to use a very small amount. So I think of it like a condiment, and then I put it in ice cube trays, and I freeze it, and then I pop the ice cube tray, the ice cubes out, and I put it in a baggie, and I put it in the refrigerator. So I just I'm sorry, not the refrigerator, the freezer. I just go to the freezer when I need to grab a little bit, but it's a rare thing that I use a whole can of coconut milk.
Excellent. I always wonder what to do with my extra coconut milk, so I'm going to be trying that from now on. How do you feel about coffee, and can you offer an alternative to coffee creamer?
Okay. We drink coffee in the morning. I think if you're drinking coffee all morning and all day, that's probably not good. If you don't drink coffee at all, that's probably great too, right? Who needs all the caffeine? But we do have a cup, maybe a cup and a half in the morning. I think that's fine. I don't know if there's any science against it, but we do drink coffee. I think the biggest trick is what do you put in your coffee? Because for years, until we really got serious, until I was probably in my mid-20s, I was putting heavy cream in it because it does its thing in the coffee, right? But I think now they have creamers that you can buy, but those creamers have a lot of oil in them. So the key is to warm up your milk. So if it's an almond milk or a soy milk, just warm it or start at room temperature and then pour your coffee in on top of it, and you won't get all those nasty curdles that happen. But you know, you can go to Dr. Greger's website, and I'm sure he has a lot to say about caffeine.
Great. And did anyone, Jody, did you want to speak to your recommendation for a coffee substitute?
Sure. I just, it had been recommended to me by other folks in the plant-based world that if I wanted to give up coffee, there's something called, I think it's Teechino, Teechino. And I tried that and I like it. It's, I think I got it through Amazon, and they have hazelnut and all kinds of nice flavors. And I put a little soy milk in, and it looks a lot like coffee. It tastes a little different, but it looks a lot like coffee. So I'm able to drink that in the morning with my sort of ritual coffee morning with my husband. So that works well for me.
You know, excuse me. One of the things that happened when we did our Jumpstarts, people were making, I mean, we were working with rural folks here in Hillsborough and Mebane. This was a big change initially. I mean, they were eating at Bojangles and drinking Mountain Dew. And so to switch right away and pull them off of coffee and, you know, all of those things, initially we didn't tell people not to have coffee. I think there's a lot of changes that go on. So if you're brand new to this and you're trying to cut out coffee and you're trying to go whole food plant-based and you've never done this before, I'd pick your battles. Yeah.
Yes, that's a good point. And I'm not a coffee drinker, but I really like the Roast Aroma tea by Celestial Seasonings. It has chicory in it, so it's kind of like a New Orleans coffee flavor. That would be my recommendation from, but as I said, I'm not a coffee drinker, so it might not be anything like it for some people. Eileen wants to know, due to an allergy in her family, is it possible to switch out peanut butter with another nut butter in recipes?
I knew I was going to get that question today. We're making a recipe tonight on the Kitchen Live show, and I'm using peanut butter. And I know that people are going to say they have, because there's so many allergies to peanut butter. I think you could use almond butter, or you could use sunflower butter. But remember that peanuts have to me, a really strong flavor, and I pair it with lime and what else? Vinegars. So you definitely can, but you're going to get a very different flavor if you're okay with that flavor, but for sure.
And we have a follow-up for people who are allergic to cashews. Do you know if they can be substituted with sunflower seeds in a 1-to-1 ratio?
Yes, you absolutely can do that. I gave a presentation to a middle school in Philadelphia, and you're not allowed to take nuts in schools because there's so many allergies. So we used sunflower seeds, and they worked beautifully. They might not thicken quite as much, but they were, and actually I liked the flavor a little bit better because it had a little bit of a toasted flavor to it. So you absolutely, and almost every recipe I have, you could do the 1-to-1 substitution.
Great, thank you, Kim. So we have had quite a few discussions posted on Facebook and questions about honey and whether or not that is included in a whole food plant-based diet or a vegan diet. What is your take on honey?
Honey is not vegan, so people need to know that it's made by bees, obviously. And when we take the honey from the beehives, we're harming the bees. So we don't use honey. I mean, occasionally I've used it if I've had a cough or a throat issue, but more for medicinal purposes. I wouldn't recommend cooking with it for 2 reasons. It's expensive, right? And I don't believe we should use it. But as far as sugars, they're all pretty much the same. Sugar is sugar, so why would you use honey over maple syrup, for example? So we don't use it. It's just, for us, it's a personal choice.
Great, thank you. So our next question is from Alan, and he's wondering whether cassava flour can be used and if it is a whole food.
I think cassava flour, I'm not sure of the answer to this, but I believe, is it tapioca starch? Is it the same thing? I think it is. I don't know if Ella knows the answer to this.
I'm not sure off the top of my head, no.
I thought it was, I think it's tapioca starch. Don't quote me on that, but I do use it as a thickener. Absolutely.
Okay. And our next question is from Donna. And she has asked if some sweeteners are better than others in baking. And so there are so many sweeteners, as we know. There's dates, maple syrup, white and brown sugar, molasses, coconut sugar, and agave. What sweeteners do you prefer?
There's a lot of sweeteners out there. I tend to use coconut sugar if I'm making cookies and I just want something, instead of brown sugar or white sugar, I use coconut sugar. It's pretty available at mainstream grocery stores. Walmart carries it. It might be a little more expensive, but sometimes if it's a little more expensive, it keeps you from using a lot of it. I don't have a real sweet tooth, so I don't bake a lot. I do use maple syrup in a lot of my recipes, but not excessive amounts. And then there's date sugar. Date sugar is more expensive, and I find you have to use more because it's not as sweet as a coconut sugar. I think if you're going to use dates, a really nice option is to use date paste and make your own. Put your dates in your food processor and with some water, and then process them and then store them in the refrigerator. That's a really nice sweetener too.
Great, thank you, Kim. The next question is from Brenda, and she would like to know, what do you think about nutritional yeast? Is it compliant to whole food plant-based eating?
Nutritional yeast flakes, I use them all the time. I do. I keep, and of course, some of them are fortified and some of them are not. So you have to decide if you want to get the kind that has the B vitamins in it. You can order it on Amazon without it. I think if you're eating a bag of it every day, that's probably not a good idea, but we use it to sprinkle on our popcorn, or I might put a couple tablespoons in a cheese sauce. We just don't eat tons and tons of it. That's not really a problem, but I think nutritional yeast flakes really adds a lot of nice cheesy flavor to plant-based dishes.
Great, thank you. And what do you use for an egg replacement?
Lots of things. The best egg replacer, if you want something that's really going to work as a binder, I would go with aquafaba. And aquafaba is bean juice, and I use chickpea bean juice. And you can actually whip it. It whips and it turns it just like egg whites. It fluffs up and gets stiff, and it's because it has proteins in it, and the proteins hold together. So that's one. So if you're making something with chickpeas and it calls for an egg replacer, 3 tablespoons of aquafaba equals 1 egg. The other thing you can do is flax meal, and that's another common one I do. So 1 tablespoon of flax meal, 3 tablespoons of water, and now you have a really nice binder, egg binder. And then the other one is chia seeds. So 1 tablespoon of chia seeds, 3 tablespoons of water, and you have an egg. So those are the ones that I use. I know they have energy, egg replacer. Don't buy those. I mean, I don't think you need to. Just get your flax meal and use your aquafaba. Keep it easy.
Great. I have a question here from Vicky that I know Nelson would love to answer. How do you know if you are getting enough protein, fiber, and other nutrients on a plant-based diet?
I never worry about it. I just don't. We eat such a variety. I don't think I've never heard of a protein deficiency in this country. In fact, my daughter, when she was at UNC Asheville, she had a plant-based nutrition professor, and she had to turn in her entire day's worth of food for a week, and her protein was more than adequate, and she eats very similar to us. So I don't really worry about that. How do you know if you get enough fiber? And I always talk about this in my cooking classes. It's probably not appropriate, but if you're having bowel movements every day, you're probably getting enough protein. And people think that if they're having 1 bowel movement every 3 days, that's normal. That is not normal. You should be going every day. And so that's a really good indicator. What happens in the bathroom is a good indicator of your diet.
Great. And so Patricia wonders, back to talking about the supplies in the kitchen, if you have tips on cleaning your silicone mat. Hers stays flavored.
Yeah, they get pretty messy. I don't use mine a ton. I put it in the dishwasher. I tend to give it a little scrub in the sink to get all the food residue off, and then I just stick it in the dishwasher. And it's like a stone. The more you use it, the more colored it's going to get. And my stones they're a mess. You wouldn't want to see them because I use them so much. Yeah.
And then what do you use to hold the beans and veggies together when you're making bean burgers?
It depends. You can use anything from cornstarch, which is a great egg replacer. You can use chia seeds. Oats will help hold it together. In fact, the oat flour is even better than just plain oats. The beans themselves will hold together. But one thing you need to realize is that a bean burger is not a hamburger. And it's more of a patty, so it's going to be a little bit softer. And I have some, I think, that are better than others. If you really want that tight veggie burger, you can put wheat gluten in it, vital wheat gluten. I don't do that. I think that's a really highly processed thing. But if you want that kind of a burger, a couple tablespoons of that would do it.
Great. And another food-related nutritional value question. What's the difference with white rice and brown rice nutritionally?
Well, brown rice has the bran on it, and there's more fiber. But I will say this. My son had a really hard time with brown rice. And so we did this thing where we would mix it and, put a little bit of brown rice in with the white rice, and he still likes white rice. So if you can't do brown rice and you absolutely struggle with it, I think that white rice is probably okay. But the other thing is, if you like the consistency of white rice because it's stickier and it's softer, buy short grain brown rice because that's really sticky. And if you cook your rice in an Instant Pot or in a rice cooker, it makes all the difference in how the rice tastes. So don't give up on brown rice until you've tried some of those strategies.
Thank you, Kim. And so this next question is commonly asked. Where can we get calcium on a plant-based diet?
You know, I think I read yesterday that collard greens, obviously kale and broccoli, collard greens are one of the highest sources of calcium. And collard greens are great. And a lot of people don't want to eat collard greens because they're big, right? And they have these great big ribs in the center of them. They're so easy. You just take the rib out, roll them up, and then slice them. I make collard ribbons. We eat them all the time. You can also put hummus in them and wrap them up and make collard sandwiches. But in your greens and your beans, if you're eating plenty of those, and I tell people when you're making soups, put greens in your soups, buy frozen bags of kale and spinach and just put it in everything. It's so good for you.
Great, thanks, Kim. So our next question is about seitan. Is that whole food plant-based or is it pretty processed?
Seitan is so processed. It's made with vital wheat gluten, which is the protein part of wheat. And I took the Ruby course, and so I had to actually make seitan. I'd never made it before. And it does take on a very similar mouthfeel to meat. I made a great big loaf of it, and I had to cut it and slice it just like meat. But I also am gluten sensitive, so I think if you're gluten sensitive, definitely stay away from it. But I don't highly recommend it. For a treat once in a while, it's okay, but I definitely wouldn't run out and buy it.
Thanks, Kim. I am curious, what are some of your family's favorite whole food plant-based meals?
We eat a lot of things because I'm always developing recipes, and I think Nelson's a lucky man in that regard because there's always food going on. But I think the thing we really like a lot is I like Italian. I love pizza and lasagna, and you are in my cookbooks, you know I love Italian. I think Nelson, if I had to say, he likes a lot of the Mexican foods, the enchiladas, the burritos. We're making tacos tonight, Thai tacos. So we do a lot of that, and I think the kids liked it. We do a lot of potatoes, baked potatoes, the potato bar that you guys had in the seminar. We do that a lot. Yeah.
Great. Dallas would like to know, should people be tracking their dietary intake with an app to understand macronutrient consumption?
That would get tiring fast. I have all I can do to put a stepper on and keep track of my steps, but if I had to put my food in, but you know, if you're somebody that, you know, that you really want to be aware of what you're eating and conscious of it, I think it's probably okay. Definitely don't think it's necessary. It's one more thing you have to worry about. I personally wouldn't do it, but if you feel like, you know, you need that validation, I guess you could do that.
We have a follow-up question from Karen regarding nutritional yeast, and I actually would like to call on Josh to answer. She was asking if it's safe to eat nutritional yeast daily, and I think in certain circumstances that might not be the case. So, Josh.
Absolutely, and I'm grateful for Dr. Greger's videos covering this, but people with Crohn's or certain autoimmune diseases might avoid nutritional yeast. And similar to what Kim mentioned too, not every nutritional yeast is created equal. Some have a lot of added vitamins and a lot of folic acid. So if you're eating a lot of these vitamins that you don't necessarily need, you might look for a brand that doesn't have a lot of that additions to it. So a little bit can be fine, but don't overdo it, and you know, stay in touch with your body and how you feel.
Thanks, Josh.
That's great. I didn't know that, Josh. That's great.
So yes, I learned that from Josh as well recently. So a follow-up, or a kind of off topic, but it's related to producing your own food. Do you have a home garden? And if so, Will asks, which crops do you suggest for home gardening?
We're making a garden this year. Nelson and I live in the woods, deep in the woods, and that was the plan, was to have a garden. We have a terrible problem with chiggers. So we don't have a garden right now. And if anybody knows how to get rid of chiggers, I would be deeply grateful.
What is it? What is it that you have?
We have chiggers. And I never, growing up in upstate New York, they're like these little bugs that they're in the spider family, and they crawl up and they get into crevices in your body, and they get into your skin, and they cause infection, and they itch like you can never imagine.
Wow.
Well, the joys of living in the South.
Yeah.
The reason why I just jumped in is I wanted to also share on the gardening question. There's some fabulous information on the PlantPure Community's website about the square foot gardening method. We've done a bunch of different webinars on that. I don't know, Ella, if you want to add anything to that, but it's especially while we're all home, and we're also reading about the food supply having issues, definitely worth taking a look at.
Yes, we have lots of great square foot gardening resources on our website, and I will post the link in the chat. And we have 3 previous webinars that you can watch to learn about square foot gardening, so you could implement a garden in your home during these times.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that is there's a lot of CSAs out there, and local people growing food. So we have somebody right around the corner, and so we just purchased a CSA boxes that come to us every week. So that's another nice way to support your local farmers.
Great. What are your thoughts about kombucha?
I like kombucha. It's a treat. In fact, I went through this whole thing where I was going to start making kombucha, and I did. I made it, and I had to have the SCOBY, and I had to pay, you have to kind of pay attention to it, and it was too much work. But I like to, every now and then I go to the grocery store, I grab a kombucha. I think if you're drinking a lot of kombucha, it's pretty acidic, and there's sugar in it, and I probably wouldn't recommend it on a daily basis. It's a treat.
All right, thank you, Kim. And so we had actually a comment and question from Judy here. She mentioned that white and brown flowers are gone from some grocery stores during this time due to COVID-19. What other flowers can you suggest that she use?
Did you say white and brown flowers or white and brown rice?
White and brown flowers.
Okay. I don't use rice flours very often because, again, I'm not a baker. And I did notice that a lot of the flours, including the whole wheat flour, was gone. I don't know if I have a substitute other than buying oats. You can buy oats and you can put them in your Vitamix and you can blend them up and make a really nice oat flour. You just can't make yeast bread with it because it won't rise. There's no gluten in oat flour, but it makes great muffins and cakes.
Great, thank you. And our last question for this Q&A portion is, do you have any suggestions for sweet treats besides fresh fruit?
Yeah, I do. I don't have a huge sweet tooth, so I tend to go for salty things. But I do love that. I know it sounds really simple, but the banana ice cream is really nice. I put that in my food processor with some cocoa powder, and you can put anything in it. You can put mangoes or fruit in it. So that kind of satisfies my sweet tooth. And then I do something else that's kind of weird. I buy those great big bags of frozen fruit at Costco, and every week I cook it up in my kitchen, and it cooks over the stove and it gets bubbly, and I thicken it with either chia seeds or cornstarch, and I put it in these big mason jars. And so that's what I have for breakfast. I have berries and oats every morning. And at night, if I have a sweet tooth, I tend to go for the banana ice cream and the fruit in the mason jar. Because you're right, sometimes an apple just doesn't do it. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Kim. I would just like to let you know that people in the comments said that vinegar and sulfur powder is good for chiggers.
Okay, thank you. I'll remember that, vinegar and sulfur powder. Okay.
I don't know about together, they were mentioned separately, but.
It sounds a little stinky.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess we're wrapping up our Q&A and ready for closing remarks. So Kim, if you could give us any closing remarks you might have, and then Jody will speak.
Yeah, I was trying to think of what I wanted to say to everybody. And I think, you know, as you're going through this and you're making a lot of changes in your home, because nobody can go anywhere, people are connecting with their food right now like they've never connected with it. And I think that's really good. I think, you know, taking the time to get in your kitchen and be part of what it is you're creating is really, really important. Get your kids in there, get your husband in there, or whatever, your partner, and really enjoy the process and connect with your food and have a lot of fun with it. I think you'll find when this whole mess with COVID is over and we can go places, you might really enjoy that Friday night cooking together. And that's what Nelson and I do for fun. Sometimes we actually cook a meal together. So just really, really connect with your food and enjoy the process, and don't overthink things, for sure.
Jody is going to unmute herself first.
Here I am. Tough stuff. Kim, that was great. I need a lesson on how to get my husband to do that, to actually spend a fun evening with me cooking in the kitchen. That will be and I think he's watching in the other room, so we'll have a chuckle about that afterwards. So closing remarks. So Kim, that was fantastic. I took so many notes. I'm going to go back, and I'm so glad we recorded this and that it'll be available. I'll certainly be watching this video again. There were so many great tips and so much great advice. So thank you so much for your time and your advice and your guidance. I also want to make sure to thank PlantPure Nation. PlantPure Nation, of course, Nelson Campbell is the founder of PlantPure Communities, and he also chairs the board of directors of PlantPure Communities, but he also wears another hat, which is at PlantPure Nation. And it was really because of a pioneering collaboration between those two organizations that has allowed this global jumpstart to happen. So we would just want to say thank you to the incredible generosity and really gracious, fantastic. Really appreciate everything that we've gotten from PlantPure Nation to make this happen. So I want to make sure we do that. Also wanted to thank everybody for participating today. The great questions we've received, many of them in the chat today, many of them in the last few days. And I think we covered a lot of ground. I know we always leave a lot of questions unanswered, but we were pretty efficient today. So good job, team. We also would very much welcome hearing comments and success stories. We're starting to get some great feedback from folks, so just keep them coming. We'd love to hear some more information about people. If you're starting to see your blood pressure go down, or you're starting to lose some weight, your energy level is a little bit better, or your mind is a little bit clearer, we'd love to hear that. We do have 2 more sessions coming up that are part of this first Global Jumpstart. The next one is on April 27th, and that one will be led by Nelson Campbell and the PlantPure Communities team. And we're going to be focusing a lot on what's next, and particularly on the PlantPure Communities pod network, so which we hope everybody will join. And if there's not a pod near you, well, first of all, you'll find out what a pod is. And if there's a pod near you, we hope you'll join. And if there isn't, we'll encourage folks to create a pod. And then the second one, which is really the day after we're done with our 10 days, we're going to have a really fun wrap-up session with Nelson and Kim and Dr. Campbell and the whole PPC team. We're going to be inviting everybody to bring a dish to the session, where we will be sharing online our meals and our recipes. And we'll also take that time to have some feedback and to hear some testimonials from some of the Jumpstarters. At that session, Dr. Campbell will also be speaking about his new commentary, which will be coming out any moment, hopefully by Monday the latest, and also an exciting lecture that's going to be taking place the next day. So with that, and both those 2 sessions are both open to the public. So with that, I ask you all who are involved in our Jumpstart to stay the course. You're making progress, it's wonderful. Remember though, progress, not perfection. Sign up for the Global 10-Day Jumpstart Challenge if you haven't already, and because we are going to be sending emails soon, so it's really not too soon to sign up for that. And with that, I wish you all to have a wonderful day and to stay safe.
And Jody, can I just say thank you for all that you guys have done at PPC. This is amazing. I just think it's amazing. They really pulled it off.
Great. Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Yeah, we have
Kim.
a great team here.